Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Fillman. Thank you for joining me here today. If it's your first time here, welcome. If you're back, thank you for your loyalty. Thank you for being a subscriber if you are. If you're not already a subscriber, I hope you will consider it. This is where we explore issues of education without fear. We take on these challenges head on, and we need your input. We're trying to be part of the solution. So welcome today. Please hit the like button. Please hit share so we can get more people in the live chat and get the conversation going. I am very fortunate today. I have, as I always am, there's not a guest I'm not going to say that about, just so you know. I'm a very lucky person. I get great guests. Today's guest is Brian Edward, who is the producer of Myth Informed MKE. That is the handle at Myth Informed MKE and all the platforms, except at the moment Twitter, where he has been booted because of his diligent work to expose what's been going on with drag shows in front of our kids. We've been talking about it on the channel. Yeah, was booted from Twitter. He's going to talk about that with us. He is also the host of the Better Discourse event, and we're going to talk about that. So without further ado, welcome, Brian.
How you doing, Deb? It's good to see you.
Doing great. Good to see you too. Thank you for agreeing to come on and explain what the hell happened.
So, yeah, we're blacklisted, booted, Twitter jailed, and it's a life sentence, they say.
It's a life sentence. Like, how do they put that when they tell you like you're booted for life?
It says permanently, I think the exact permanently suspended. Yeah, so it says error when you try to log into your account. It says error, your account is permanently suspended.
Okay.
And you can still see it, but you just can't DM with it. So your account says 0 followers, 0 following, and so you can access Twitter with it. You can't like anything, you can't retweet, and then the little error code that says you're currently suspended, or it says your account is permanently suspended, but then the error code says you're currently suspended.
And what's their justification? Like, what did you violate in the terms of service?
Yeah, so they copyright specifically. So it was what they call a DMCA claim. So that's a copyright claim. If you are say you have music in the background of your podcast that's copyrighted, you can get picked up for that because you're potentially monetizing your podcast. You didn't pay for the music, that kind of thing.
Right.
So in this case, it was a monetized picture, or at least a picture of a drag kid called Desmond is Amazing. And the video isn't even about Desmond is Amazing. And I did link on Getter, it's still up. You can see the video, but what we found was a video. And everything is about Pride Parade. Are these family-friendly events? Can we have drag for kids? So on and so forth. And in 2019, there was a Pride Parade in LA, and there's a man on the street guy going around interviewing. And he was asking people, like, is it okay to have like kink displays of BDSM in front of kids? And the guy seemed okay with it. And the other one was saying, well, hey, this Desmond of Amazing performed in a New York bar. They put dollar bills or gave them tips in the same way that you might give tips to strippers. Do you think this is cool? And then the guy's like, yeah, I don't see a lot of problem with it. That was the point. The point was people are okay with like adult themed pieces and kids spaces mixing. And that's our contention. That's my problem. I'm pretty libertine on this. Adult spaces are fine, but keep kids out of them. Don't let them mix. Don't let the strip club near the school. Anyways, in that video, there was a picture of Desmond in a newspaper clipping. The point was say, hey, all the listeners, all the watchers of this were like, this was to clue you in that this was a major news story. This wasn't just something that happened at somebody's house. And for that, the mother of the kid said, that's a copyrighted picture. I own the rights to that. My kid doesn't. My kid's a minor, can't consent. And we think you're collecting information on minors. That was part of the complaint. So, but mostly it was this, you're not allowed to use copyrighted picture. But when you're doing a reporting function, this falls under fair use. You're allowed.
One would assume this happened in public.
Yes. Now the video's dubbed in. So on the video, on the Man on the Street video, when they're talking about the event, he puts a newspaper article, clips it in kind of in the corner, like as an overlay in the final edit. That's to clue you in that this was a major news story. Like Oh yeah, that's what they're talking about. And that's apparently what got us. Now,
and they wouldn't even let you just take it down.
right. So yeah, they took it down, right? So that happened automatically, but then they suspended the account permanently. I suspect that had we been pro this, if we've been, I don't know if we get DMCA'd in the first place by the mother, but certainly maybe she gets everything. Then, but Twitter, do we think that they're totally neutral and they don't take a look at the account's content? Or do you think that they have, like, you take a list and, well, these guys look like a hate group or whatever? That's what it is. If there's a group of people that disagree with you, that's a hate group. Like all pro-life groups seem to be hate groups now.
Right. Well, it makes me nervous because I've been trying to cover this issue myself. No, I haven't used footage of this sort. I mean, I think I've used, just papers and still pictures and things, but it does make me nervous because, what we're trying to do is just cover the issue. Obviously, we live in America. People are going to disagree with us. I mean, their parents, people of all ages are going to say, well, I disagree with you. I'm going to take my kids to the drag show. Okay. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's their right to do. It's their children. And obviously I'm a person who sits there and says, parental rights, don't let the government come between you and your rights. And unless you're like literally harming the kid. And I'm not in a position yet myself personally to make an argument that I can conclusively state, like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a shrink, I can't say like you are definitely hurting your child. I can say I don't agree with you. I think it's a bad idea. I can give you the 75 reasons why I think, my opinion, it's a bad idea. But what I don't get is why the platforms don't get that it's like they're allowed to have their opinion that this is a good idea, that this is helpful, compassionate, empathetic, whatever it is. And then why can't we have a similar opinion, similar right to say, well, I disagree with that. Yeah. Like, that's not hate. Like, we've gotten to a point where it's like, I disagree with you, ergo it's hate.
But we did the same thing with the coronavirus, right? It was the Wuhan coronavirus. No. You need to call it COVID-19. You can't call it that. It may have come from a lab. No. You can't say that. Right. All kinds of stuff about the vaccine, things about the Ukraine. That's the thing. What is the political radioactive topic? And that changes really from month to month. And right now it is drag kids. That is radioactive. If you step on that landmine, and we did, that could get you a permanent suspension.
Is it specifically the kids doing it, or is it just drag shows for kids?
I'm almost sure of it because prior to that, so Milwaukee, and that's where we are. So Myth Informed MK East is our airport code. That's short for Milwaukee, which everybody thinks is in Minnesota, and that's Minneapolis.
Wait, what?
But, yeah, I know. Lots of people.
We've fallen so far that people think Milwaukee's in Minnesota geographically.
I so many people. I think they get them confused. I think they just, those are those way up north states. I don't care. I used to get Vermont and New Hampshire confused. So,
that's a little more understandable. I mean, they're just like inverted puzzle pieces of each, just which one comes first. Okay.
No one wants to think about this kind of stuff up here. They just see Fargo and they're like somewhere near Fargo. They're like, can you talk like that?
That's North Dakota.
I know, but it's only an hour away. I'm kidding. Okay. But anyways, it's not a big deal. But right now, drag kids, it's absolutely toxic. The reason why I think it's not drag queens is because we went to the Milwaukee Brewers baseball game about 2 weeks ago or so, and they had a drag queen. Or a whole drag queen show that was going to take place an hour before the game. And the place that they were going to do it was like this fishbowl. They call it like the loge area. It's the beer garden. And everyone walking by on the second level could see it, right? So this isn't private in any way. And it's open to the outside. So anyone waiting to get in through their tickets could also see it. So it's very public. And they called it an all ages show, whatever that means. And due to kind of social media outcry, there was Dan O'Donnell, who's a local AM radio person, who he really pushed this. And the Brewers sort of changed, and they got weirded. Now, two things happened. One, it rained, so you can't have it on the beer garden. But instead of kind of putting it in some other public place that was covered by the rain, they put it on the very top terrace level, way up in the thing, and then they made it 21, and then they carded people. So, okay, in some ways, fine. You know, this was, you had to be 21 to get in. So, you know,
Yeah.
this is no longer a family friendly kids event, whatever that means. But we reported on this, took video from the event. Dora Diamond, the actual person, then even commented and yelled that we didn't tip them. And then we just, some of Dora's political commentary, that was the part that we kind of put up there. That stayed up, that didn't get knocked down. And we're very critical of that. So,
Right.
but yeah, the kid. And so one, I think you've got an activist mom that's looking for any content that her particular kid is in. And then you have a Twitter who is very, very weird about, you know, we need harm reduction. I mean, right now, what our argument is to keep kids away from this is harm reduction, I think. And I think that's what they're claiming, the same thing. No, we need to normalize it for harm reduction. I think they're making the same claim.
But I mean, where does that stop? So right now the kid is a drag kid, a drag kid. But what if it becomes a drag kid / you know what I'm gonna say, kid?
Right.
Okay. I mean, obviously there's potential harm to that child, but it isn't the harm being done in what they're doing, not in people's reaction to what they're doing. So, I mean, at what point are we going to recognize that protecting someone from the harm of the harm is a bit ridiculous?
Yeah.
Like maybe tell the mom to go get treatment for the Munchausen.
It could be. I mean, like, you could take a question on, like, how old do you have to be as a child to say, watch the movie Saving Private Ryan from beginning to end, especially that opening scene, right? That's pretty brutal. War, and like, you're seeing body parts, you scream, and it's pretty violent. You know, and we're not saying that the violence doesn't happen. Obviously, this is real, like, but is this a good thing? I mean, that can be debated. And I think that's the debate we want to have, is at what point are you allowed to kind of like mix, you know, what's level of racy? You know, women shouldn't have to cover up, you know, in the same way that like some hadith from Islam says you ought to, right? So we know, okay, you know, a woman in a bathing suit around a kid, there's no problem there, most people would say. I mean, some people might say, you know, where's the line? You know, what is this? And I think that needs to be discussed. I'm not saying I know the absolute answer. I just generally think that putting money down a kid's shorts, or having a kid put money down adults' shorts, like, that crosses it, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, we know it's not, I agree that there needs to be a debate, but what I think bothers me is that for 80, 90 years or so, we've known about child development stages, and we've known how the brain, well, not for 80, 90 years, but we've known more recently, like how the brain develops in terms of when it's capable of rational thought, is part of why we have consent laws at all.
Yeah.
Why we don't have child marriage in America, why we don't have, you know, ritualistic mutilation and things like that, because we know what a child is. We had a definition of child.
Yeah.
And we've had that definition of child. It was a pretty widely agreed upon definition since we banned child labor. Okay, so let's use that as a starting point. You know, that before that, children were treated like miniature adults. You got to go to work at the factory, whatever. So once we figured out that no, a child's a unique creature with its own needs and its own development, from then we've only gotten, I think, better. We were sort of on a trajectory of getting better at protecting the unique developmental stages of children. And then it feels like at some point we just took, I don't know, somebody took a hard left. It was like, we're chugging along, making good progress, protecting kids. But, you know, there are two things that happened. We went overboard, I think, in like the 80s. We went overboard, and then like, oh my God, there's people with panel vans going around kidnapping everybody. Like we went a little berserk.
And now everything had to be play dates. You couldn't let your kid like ride the
play
bike
dates and organized, and parents are in charge of everything, the hover mom, whatever. And of course, now that was the physical protection, also the mental trophies for everybody. So, you know, this is like late 80s, 90s was that era of, you know, protection from. So we got to a point of like where I think pretty good protection of children, probably by the end of the 70s or so, not counting human trafficking. Obviously, there's always more work to be done. And then we suddenly just kept going too far. And at some point, the hover tendency went a little cuckoo and got into like, I'm not ready for my child to be a grown-up at all. I want them to play dress up for the rest of their life. And I want them to do it in a lucrative manner where it's like, you know, it's like, I mean, you started getting people like using their children as props. whether it's the beauty contests or
Mhm.
this stuff. And we should absolutely be debating this. Like I said, it's not because I necessarily want immediately like, laws.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying we used to be able as a society just be like, that's a bad idea. We shouldn't do that. So we
Yeah,
don't
you
do
just
that.
be able to talk about this kind of stuff.
Right.
There were conversations. Is it okay for like a Protestant to go into a Catholic church or vice versa? Are you allowed to have friends that are Baptist if you're a good practicing Catholic, or is that an occasion of sin? I don't know. I mean, that's something that you can talk about. There's been religious, if you rewind, like if you look at some of like the Kennedy elections coming up, there was a narrative that said, if Kennedy gets elected, we're going to be ruled by Rome. He's the first
Yeah, I
Catholic
know.
president, you know, so that this is because there's a big Protestant
Yep.
versus Catholic animosity there. Okay, but that can be worked out. That's largely absent now. But what we're seeing is a progressive versus whatever, you know, this progressive and whatever's in the opposite, this ideologies, this is what is in more conflict right now. So my prescription is more talking about this. You know, we weren't saying that this is absolutely and always wrong. We're just saying it's weird that so many people seem to be absolutely okay with it.
Right.
You know?
Well, this is, therein lies the problem in their minds. There's no discussion to be had. And where my eye stuck was in their minds, because I'm sitting there going, well, who's they and why did they get to be they? In other words, right now, the dominant mindset or the dominant view that gets to decide, no debate needed here, is the one with this particular ideology.
Right.
And
then you could debate within the ideology, right?
Correct.
So there's all kinds of nuance takes of different label, you know, versions of progressive. But like as soon as a conservative or somebody else that's non-woke opines, now, yeah, then that's harmful or problematic.
Well, that's the part that fascinates me. Why do you think it is that these established platforms like Twitter, we're talking about a platform that is, we know worth $44 billion or more,
Right.
whatever. And is, the size of bigger than some small countries and so forth, if you take all of its members. You would think that they would have the clout, to a financial clout and the social clout, to be able to choose, from, whatever their bias is. I would never expect them really to have a zero bias. Okay.
Right. No one does.
But at the same time, they go with the most extreme consistently. They go with the most extreme, the most anti-tradition, the most anti everybody. It's almost like the tiniest minority they can find other than the individual. They don't have any use for us. That's what they consistently go for. And this is what fascinates me. Why do you think that is? Do you think they're true believers, or is there something else?
So yeah, and this is fairly recent, right? So how old is Twitter? Like 2006, 2009, in that range?
Thereabouts.
It didn't happen right at the beginning, and this wasn't even true in 2015 or 16, right? I got worried when Alex Jones got booted off, because remember, he didn't get booted off just Twitter. In fact, Twitter actually waited a little bit, but it was Facebook, and then Instagram, all of them, Pinterest, Tumblr, and everybody, like all the different stores, like Etsy and all the different places knocked him off altogether. And you're like, is that random? Or are they talking about it? So I think that you have this huge amount of groupthink that these kind of things just roll over society. You've had, how did prohibition happen? Right? You've got a lot of people moving towards this. I mean, in order to get that amendment passed, you've got to have this temperance league, the temperance movement's really got to get strong. And I think we have a social justice movement that is getting very, very strong. And this is what you're starting to see, is particular bans on this because they think it's bad. And, there's a kernel of truth to, you don't want to promote hate speech. There's certainly things like that are probably really ugly. But you don't think about the other side, the civil liberties. The same thing with prohibition. Alcohol was destroying a lot of people's lives. This is bad, but yet it knocks out a lot of civil liberties. You have to balance those things. And I think we're just in this weird puritanical thing. It's a lot like prohibition. I think there's a lot of true believers there. I think there's a lot of people that are ideologues. Like Carrie Nation, I mean, she would chop down apple orchards, go through and knock down bars. I mean, this is a radical. right? This is absolutely one of the people at the head of the BLM rallies, maybe throwing a Molotov cocktail or something, or Antifa. And then you have a lot of people that just say, hey, alcohol is bad. And this is the case, hate speech is bad. We need to have a safe place for the children. So I absolutely believe they're true believers. I don't know how much they've thought through it though. Ask a person in like a fundamentalist religion. I've talked to people like this, like, why do you believe what you believe? And some of them, they're not, I expected them to be huge into scripture and really know it. And they're like, this is the church we've always gone to. My father went here, my grandfather went here, we always go here. They don't know that much, but this is their community and they act a certain way.
Well, and the pull is strong. And I experienced this myself just the other day related to COVID. Met one of my daughter's friends for the first time. Took them out to dinner. We were just hanging out and the kids in the backseat of the car. And we're talking about how my eldest, who's at her dad's, has COVID. She was vaccinated. She's the only one of my children who got vaccinated. She's 18 and she decided, I'm going to go do it. And I'm like, nothing I can do. So, okay. She decided to do it. And she got quite sick. And in fact, now all of them in that household are very sick and they've all been vaccinated. Well, except for my middle daughter, who's the least sick of the ones in that household. Well, anyway, so we were talking about it and we were talking about how my youngest is going to stay here with us, blah, blah, blah. And, I said, well, you're in good shape because you had it recently naturally. And now you have, natural immunity is, even better. Right. Or something like that's really good. And this kid that was with us pipes up, actually the best is natural immunity plus the vaccine. That's what science says. Like just met the kid, like met, like 14-year-old kid in my car, doesn't know me from a hole in the wall and just pipes up and interrupts me. No, I wasn't offended. I mean, it's like, okay. But the pull is so strong in that I wanted so badly to say, well, there's some new research out that actually contradicts that, but I didn't. And I was sitting there as I was pulling back from saying anything, I was analyzing it. Like I'm doing this little metacognition experiment in my head. I'm like, why are you restraining yourself from your natural inclination to challenge what was just said in front of you?
How old is he? 16?
14. They're both 14.
Okay.
And here's what went on in my head. First of all, they're 14. Yeah. So there was that.
You got to factor that in. Yeah.
Right. So I'm factoring that in. Second thing I'm factoring in is, do I really want to fight this battle? With a 14-year-old kid? Like, not really. And, so I went through this whole thing, but the pull to not be rude, the pull to, it's a small example, but the pull to just like not have an argument. And I'm a person who obviously doesn't shy away from arguments. So now I'm extrapolating from that to people who are in a position where it's not a 14-year-old kid. It's, their boss or it's somebody else and there's more at stake and so forth and so on. And I had to sit there and actually like, not going to do it. Right. When I had really relatively little to lose, except pissing off my kid. She wouldn't have liked that. So that was a big motivator. But I think of all the people who are out there, like, just don't want to have an argument about it. So I think what we've gotten to is we have the majority of people are probably conflict avoidant. And like I just was, for a variety of reasons. And we are a society, I think, that rewards that rewards agreeableness, general agreeableness. Okay. And then on top of that, you have all the stuff you said that was sort of true attached. Like, well, we want to be accepting. We want to be tolerant. We don't want to be judgy, but all these things that have been painted as negative. And by the time you get done with your little quick thought process, and am I going to open my mouth and speak? It's gone. It's done. So I think what ends up happening is these ideas dominate because they can. They just were naturally inclined to let the loudest, most disagreeable person win by default because we don't want to have a fight.
Yeah, that happens. But the other part of it, like, it depends on who that is. I think that happens a lot. But if you're one of the people that understand the literature, when some of the leaders, and this is where I think it may be either dishonest or they're complete fundamentalists. If you go back to like the Herbert Marcuse stuff, remember, this is a guy that came over from Frankfurt School. He knows a lot about the Nazis. And this is something that he saw rise to power. This is oh, wow. Well, we don't want to have that happen again. And one of the ideas is to stop, say, Nazism was that, like, well, if we would have just nipped it in the bud early, right? Everyone says, oh yeah, we definitely go back in time and kill Hitler in 36 or something. But that repressive tolerance, don't let it get started. Don't even let it get started. Like, forget about it. And I think a lot of people believe that, oh,
Yeah.
wow, see, we could have this again. This is 1933. And again, no one thought in 1933 that, that World War II was going to happen, or Hitler, that the Nazis would. So I think a lot of people are spooked. And this is what happens when you spook a population. These people are saying, yeah, this is causing harm. This is directly this societal, because we're not progressing. We're staying regressive on trans. This is the argument, is that's hurting people. That's killing people. These people are committing suicide. Why can't we just move forward on this? And imagine themselves in civil rights. There were a lot of people in the 1960s they thought, okay, here's my chance to not be the white person that was scoffing at Jackie Robinson's inclusion in the MLB or something. I really think, and when you're looking for purpose in your life, I'm a good person, I'm an activist. That's a form of religion. Like that can really that can balance your life.
Well, and we also, when we look back at history, we remember the ones who spoke out like against the prevailing wisdom. We remember them. And we remember the ones who were aggressively doing the prevailing thing. But what we forget is the vast majority who are just getting through the day, not saying anything, maybe secretly disagreeing with it, secretly hating it, but basically doing nothing about it, because they had other things that took precedent at that moment. And it's how are we to judge, right? And in hindsight, we don't know what we would do. We really don't know, right? In those situations. But when I look at things now where the cost to say something is still really low, relatively speaking, like they're not hauling people off to camps, right? And people are still not saying anything. They're not. And when they do, yes, there are consequences, but even what happened to you, which sucks. And we all want you back on Twitter. I'm still thinking,
I hope we get back. That would be nice.
I hope so too. Well, Elon Musk just, they approved the deal today. So maybe we can appeal.
I don't know. See, like Elon himself still says that this is going through. Like, I really don't know what's going to happen to Twitter. I'm crossing my fingers that this will go through, but there's other reasons I think that it might not. Oh, hey, Sean, like the table's bouncing a lot from typing. So could you just all right, sorry. My friend's over here like working on something and like it's bouncing the table too much. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, even that, it's like you're not going to stop speaking out on other platforms just because just because Twitter kicked you off, right? Like, in other words, you guys didn't do anything wrong. You're just trying to have the conversation.
Right. And so we don't think we did anything wrong. So we are appealing this. So we have a GoFundMe that is available to help. Ron Coleman is the person we.
So he's a lawyer.
Yeah, he's a kind of a famous lawyer. He's with Harmeet Dillon's law group, because this isn't a hate speech claim. So this isn't a terms of service on hate speech. This is actually a legal DMCA. There is a way to fight that. And if we can say, yes, we're within fair use, then okay. Well, then they have to take a look back at this. They could still say, well, we think overall you're still canceled, but they actually do have to do it.
Yeah.
So that's the appeal. So that's why we have a small GoFundMe for that.
Yeah, because I mean, I get.
Yeah, and it's a Give, Send, Go, not GoFundMe. Did I say that?
Yeah, that's why I was like, GoFundMe. But
yeah.
Do you have the link for that? Because we can throw that up as a banner, and with people, I want people.
Yeah, let me find the link for that.
Yeah. I'm gonna just real quick show people the screen. I'm not gonna play it so I don't get in the same trouble, because now that I know that that's an issue, it's in this video, right? The copyright thing. It's in the video.
Yeah. Again, like maybe she submitted to Getter, but Getter thought it's fine. Again, this is well within fair use.
Right, I'm sure. But guys, this is what we're talking about. See this video here where they posted Pride March goers defend the practice of drag kids getting tips by citing it's a thing in drag culture. It's the same thing you do with strippers, which is weird to me. So you do the same thing you do with strippers with kids. Okay. Another attendee defends public BDSM in full view of children. I'm down for the kink with kids. I mean, wow. See, this part, well, it's just factual. You're just quoting what they said. This is the part that you wonder if the true believers saw this, said, shh, we got to silence this.
Could be like,
and they're using the excuse of copyright.
It could be. I mean, I have a feeling this is an activist mom that, so she probably took a look. I mean, it's pretty neutral reporting. But
and that's the kid.
Look at our feed. No, so that's just a person on the street. This isn't interviewing the Pride Parade goers. As the video plays, like around the 6 or 7 second mark, he puts up an article of
I saw that. That was
that's
just showing
the point. That's all. So that's the claim is that inside of that. So that we showed an article with this person's picture. That's the claim. It's so weak.
Yeah, that I would think that is fair use. I mean, like you said, if this was in the news or this was published, first of all, that was a news story, and then in a news article, how is that not fair use? I don't even see how that would not be fair use. That's bizarre.
Exactly. So you have two things. So, and who is the arbiter, the first arbiter of what's fair use? Well, it's Twitter. And
so
then Twitter's also the arbiter of what punishment.
There it is. There's the news article.
Yeah. And that's boom. That's the nut. So had we maybe grade that out or something, then maybe they don't have a claim, but still this is an activist mom. And then you've got a place to see how this is good enough. It's kind of like when you went through the yellow light. How yellow was it? Did it just turn yellow and you couldn't have possibly stopped? Or was it red? And this is the cop arresting you for the yellow light.
Well, part of why I get so frustrated about this is I've had people take my entire video, like let's say this entire stream.
Yeah.
I've had them take it, make a reaction video on it, stopping, taking clips live while they're doing it, cackling maniacally, taking the clips, putting them on Twitter, saying, oh, this is going to really make her crazy and everyone's going to hate her kind of thing. Like, and then continuing on to say more horrendous defamatory things about me for an entire video. And that was deemed fair use. The person monetized that harassment. And that was deemed fair use and a challenge. But a news clipping?
I know. That's what it is. They said that's my copyrighted photo, and that I own the copyright to this as a mom, and the kid is a minor. He can't possibly consent to this, and you're collecting information on minors. I have no idea what that even means, but it's in there. And then they don't say what this is the part that we felt was good. Twitter just says, yeah, this is a DMCA claim. We believe them. You can fight it. Here's your appeal. So we put the appeal, but that's a legal process. So that's why we need an attorney. And then if that goes through, then they have to say, okay, well, you've had other problems with your account. And one of the other problems with the account, we tweeted 3 really naughty words, Steph. They're super naughty. I don't know if I should say them. Ivermectin saves lives. That's the tweet. Those 3 words. Doesn't say anything about COVID, doesn't say anything about it. And then we were 12-hour timeout, and they put a misinformation.
You didn't even say from any specific illness.
Just that it saved lives.
Just that which is a known fact for 50 years.
Right. A drug that won the Nobel Prize in 2015 for doing just that. Yes. But they believed, oh, you probably think this. Or people interpret as such. This is outrageous. To say that, Trump is popular, and then you could just take that to say, oh, you want to kick all Muslims out of the country. We just said Trump is popular. You see that this is the level that Twitter's taking it to.
Wow.
So I think they call that malinformation, right? You have disinformation. That's
malinformation.
Purposeful. Right. Then you have misinformation, which is kind of a misinterpreted. Then malinformation is correct information, but it might be interpreted in the wrong way. Like if you said,
you know what?
Only 9 people were killed by police. 9 unarmed black men were killed by police in last year. Then you might say, well, that's you're denigrating the lives of black people.
How about this one? Dihydrogen monoxide kills people.
Oh, ouch. Yeah.
I mean, it's like malinformation. People drown. They do. They drown.
That's
He
true.
does. He kills people. I mean, it's like, this is so ridiculous.
Yes, and too much water. Remember that famous thing with the radio contest where they had people drink water?
Yes.
And then one of them got, she
You can
basically
die.
got, the
They
salt,
drowned from the inside out, drowned.
Mhm.
And that some think that's what happened to Terry Schiavo. She was just pounding like iced tea or something one day, like to a ridiculous degree. And one of the theories is that she basically had a drowning episode from this and lost oxygen to her brain. And then that's what happened, because nobody really knows what happened. And that's like,
She got hypotonic. Wow, I never heard of that, but maybe
that was one thing that I heard as a possible explanation. I was like, anyway,
wild.
but this is ridiculous when you can't even make a true statement because somebody might interpret that you mean
Correct. That's malinformation. That's what they mean. So we think that that's what we got nailed. And that
meanwhile, they'll go out there and say so and so should be hanging from a tree, but as long as that person's a Republican.
Yeah. So Brett Weinstein, like he said, why did Myth Informed get knocked for like this obviously true statement? And but so we couldn't retweet that because we were on a timeout. So these are the things that they're saying in total. This is the problem. Yeah, like so Twitter clearly has a bias, and yeah, I would love Elon if he actually does get his hands on it. But here's the reason I worry a little bit. I mean, one, like, is it full of bots? Is it worth what he's paying for it? But the other thing is Twitter it's not there to make money. This is soft power. The Saudis used Twitter. They got somebody inside Twitter or were able to hack Twitter to unmask all of their dissidents that were blogging under fake names on Twitter, right? And like, so imagine the soft power that Twitter has. The news basically just reports what happened on Twitter for the last 2 days. I mean, CNN, Fox News, they all do that.
It's true. It's very true. Yeah, it's gotten to the point where people look to that for exerting their influence.
And it's narrative starts. The narrative starts right away. And when I'm fine with narratives in a way, because narratives are narratives, but you want to be looking at more than one, right? So if the normie, the go along to get along person, like that you were saying, this is most people. If they see one narrative and they're, oh, that's weird. But then if they see the counter narrative right next to it, it's a lot more balanced. Yeah, but this. But if only one narrative is being seen and then everybody's putting it out, every sense-making institution, you might think, well, all those people can't all be wrong, right?
Yeah, I mean, I see intellectually how that happens. It's just I must be just too old to be susceptible to it or something. I don't know. No, what I'm saying is I feel sort of weird every time I have these conversations about social media, in particular Twitter. I see it more on Facebook, but I feel like that must suck. Like I'm looking at other people, because for me, it has been on balance, 85% a positive thing in my life. I've made a ton of friends. I've been able to build this platform. I have been able, I think, to learn a lot about the, issues surrounding education from a wide range of people, because I'm trying to make things better. I'm trying to help people make things better. So I've been able to talk to people who are doing things at work, as well as people who are highlighting things that don't work. And Twitter has been the go-to place for that for me. I haven't found nearly the success at this kind of research on any other platform. Obviously, I supplement that with, Substacks for deeper dives and things like that. But for the high level, where do I need to look and what's going on and who do I need to connect with? It's been fast, easy, and effective. And I don't know if it's how I use it or I don't even know, but it's been on balance pretty damn good. Even with the occasional trolls and junk, it's been minimally invasive. But then I hear this stuff about some people just having their lives undone and ruined, and all of a sudden I'm like, is it like I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop? Is it, is that where they're coming for me and I just haven't come yet? I don't know. But I mean, I'm not big. I'm not anybody important that anybody really wants to take down. But what I'm saying is,
or you haven't stepped on the right beehive.
But that's what I'm saying is like, what is the secret poison? And it seems like, if I go by your case, it seems like if you run something that's counter to the narrative and are big enough. So it's like got to be a combination. Mm-hmm. You've got to be popular enough and kind of spread wide enough that you going against the grain is an exercise of soft power away from the one they want
and it puts you at risk. So I think that there was a video that we put up prior to that, maybe an hour and a half. And it was Savannah Hernandez doing the same thing at a Pride Parade event and just generalized asking people different things. And they asked, what is your, they said, LGBT people are marginalized and so on and so forth. And she asked the question, well, can you give me an example of how this community is marginalized? And the guy's like, I just can't think of one right now. And it was kind of funny.
I know they're there.
Right, but he couldn't. So it's like a 1 minute clip of this guy not being able to figure it out and kind of apologizing. And I'm like, all right, we put that out there. That didn't get nailed. So I really think this one was activist mom. Like, had it been something else, we may not get nailed. So, but the thing is, if you have an activist targeting you, or a lot of people that are mass flagging you and this and that, then you get sent to the arbiter. And once, if you've got a biased arbiter, then that's weird. A lot of you would see a lot of these in repressive societies. In the Soviet Union, right? Everybody was spying, but this was a really easy way to just call out your enemies that you had hated before Stalin ever got into power. You always hated those jerks, and now you can just say, yeah, you're spying for the kulaks. You're counter-revolutionary activities, and then the state hauls you away. And so I think we're seeing a lot of weaponization. That's why the state must be fair, or Twitter must be fair.
Right. So what would you like to see happen? I mean, do you have a sort of a wish list of things you would like to see done with or for social media? So that things like this.
I really think so if Elon gets it and he puts in his policy, however this looks, and I believe him, he said it multiple times. He goes, the best social media content moderation policy is when the most extreme 10% on the left and the right are equally unhappy. That's a great rule of thumb. I'm not exactly sure how it means in practice, but you can get a feel for that, because I feel like, we're nicely in that pretty wide margin of that 80% in the middle, then that's fine. And again, that doesn't mean that if you're on the 10%, you're necessarily going to get censored, but some of that will, because you're not going to be, there's certain things that probably are over the line.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, there are people openly, the people who are bald-faced lying, like just straight up lying, like, oh, puberty blockers are totally reversible. You want to talk about medical misinformation? Yeah. That's like, that, if nothing else, should be getting a tag going, that's not even remotely true. And then you've got things where people are calling for violence. They're explicitly calling for violence, and they get away with it because the target of their violence is somebody that is not on the left, not woke, whatever. And it just goes. Kyle Rittenhouse, you can say whatever you want to say about that poor kid, nothing bad is going to happen to you.
Sure. Yeah.
And they say things.
Equal enforcement. So if you're going to get really nuts on the COVID, or vaccine or medical misinformation, for example, but then the idea is if it's only hitting one side, whether it's the pro-vax or the anti-vax side, that's the problem. It needs to be hitting it equally. And that's the problem, that you're going to go after, okay, well, this pro-vax person says the vaccine is actually stopping infection. Well, no, it's not. So then take that down. But do you notice, like, anything that touts the vaccine is never taken down, but lots of things that are saying the vaccine is really bad, and those are the ones that are most risk taken down, or ivermectin saves lives.
Right.
How do you say a vaccine saves lives? No problem. That doesn't get censored.
I think it should be limited to something that is objectively false. So like you just said, that it prevents infection. Well, that's objectively false. We now know that definitively it does not. Even the CDC says it does not. Okay. So it seems like if something is objectively like the earth is flat false, then that makes sense to me, not even to take down, just to flag it. Be like, false. Here's the link to what is true, whatever. Because that you at least teach people. If you take it down, then somebody else believes it tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Same thing with the puberty blockers. If you had both of those things happening simultaneously, it would probably be more palatable than we only take down the thing about the vaccine, and we don't take down, or we only take down the thing. We don't take either because they're both from the same point of view. But my point is, as long as you're being factual, it's less about the side that it came from and more about this was objectively false. It's just
Right.
not
But
even.
people are gonna argue over the facts. So right now they like say the Wuhan lab leak, right? That there was a time that Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and all of this, man, if you said anything about the lab leak theory being legit or probable, you were in big trouble. But now even the other side says, oh well, yeah, that's a totally reasonable theory, but we didn't know that then, but we know it now. So this is why I'm a little problem with truth claims, especially when it comes into science, is something that like, oh no, it was false claim back then, but it's true now. No, it was obviously true then. So you can't back it up. So I'm real worried about those things. But either way, if you're gonna go crazy on one side, it has to be balanced. So
for sure.
I think you should sort of. I'm not exactly sure what it's supposed to be, but I know Twitter is doing a bad job.
Well, I also think there should be more opportunities for remediation. I think these permanent bans are ridiculous. I mean, now I'll leave it up to the individual. If the individual says, no, I'm not going to do what you're asking me to do because whatever, pride or just principles, okay, then fine. But in, the case of, well, we have to take it down because it's a copyright infringement. Okay, then the copyright's not being infringed anymore. Next.
Right.
Like you've essentially solved the problem. If so that's why you said like, okay, it was taken down, but then what was the next problem? What was the next problem?
Are you a serial offender, spammer? But even with license points, like if you get arrested for speeding, right? Or you ran a stop sign, you get 2, 3, 4 points. You could even go to court to maybe get it knocked down. But at some point, like 14 points, do you lose your license? But if you're at 11, you're on thin ice, right? So, but if you're at 3, you know where you're at. You didn't know where you're at. Like, it'd be nice if you had some kind of score to measure it, and that it would be public. So if you got canceled, I can see exactly why. At least they said you got canceled.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I back before social media was big as a place for people to go and socialize. Like, I don't even think Facebook yet existed, but back in about 2005 or so, I mean, it may have existed, but I mean, it wasn't something we all used. I was a member of a forum that was for moms here in Charlotte. And it was literally called Charlotte Mommies, thousands and thousands of moms. And they had a section of it called the Sandbox, which was a forum for discussing politics and things like that. They were hilarious. They called it the Sandbox.
Oh, funny.
And as you can imagine, this was when Hillary was running also and Obama, and they were vying for the nomination and so forth. I was in the teeny tiny minority of moms who were not supporting either one of them. Okay. And so they had what's called a blue card system that if you got 3 blue cards, you were out, you were banned. So you could, and it renewed each month. So you had at least like you went back to 0 at the end of a month, you could start over. But if you hit the 3, you're gone. You know what I mean? So like if you got to 2, you could like just hold your breath. And they did that as a way of kind of like giving you a little bit of a timeout or a warning or whatever. And it wasn't that bad. I mean, I didn't love it because the moderators were really aggressive and they operated sort of like how Harris Teeter's operating now that someone whined and complained about cup cozies that advertise the Second Amendment. Oh, we're so sorry. We'll remove those from our store. So it didn't take much to get the blue card, but at least you had a warning. Well, I got fed up after a while because they were just banning all my friends. And I figured my days were numbered too, because it was so one-sided. And I said, I'm creating my own. So I went and created my own discussion forum, and I made the decision not to have that. That instead I wrote very detailed rules that included things like, you come wearing your big girl pants. And basically this is lightly moderated, assume benign intent. And we are not talking about easy topics. And just, if you go to ad hominem, that's going to bring you on the moderation radar and so forth. So we just said and I even gave scenarios. How do I know if I'm insulting them? Well, let me give you an example. And I literally wrote out little scenarios and I tried to make them funny.
Sure. How'd it go?
And it went so great that in the entire 3.5 years that thing ran until people started disappearing, going off to Facebook. So I kind of lost out to Facebook, but whatever. It was fun while it lasted. But in that entire time, I only had to ban 2 people because what it took to get banned was you had to be so over the top insane, so persistently. Like it was like, if you one time, and my policy was this: don't come to a moderator until you've gone to that person privately. If
That's
I
another
need
good
to,
thing too.
and
Yeah.
I need to see the copy, the screenshot of the private message that you have attempted to reach them privately, and they've either not responded or they responded in kind, or it was like it wasn't fruitful. Then the moderators will come in. But we're not even, you're adults. Behave like adults. And if you have a problem with somebody, you take that private and you deal with it. You don't come running to mommy and say, fix it for me. It worked beautifully. And so I guess my thinking is, I tend to believe that more loosely moderated things with more explicit, clear guidance on what you're expecting works better. Well, at least the little warning system. But I mean, I liked what I did. I didn't even have a warning system. It wasn't necessary. It was, if you hadn't come with your receipts, don't come to me at all.
That's actually really good. Yeah, I'm not sure if what works at scale at Twitter, but yeah,
Exactly.
what you're saying is this can be done, and these guys are good at this. Like, give it a college try, but right now it's absolutely absurd.
I mean, it seems like they could do it, or they could at a minimum have a little box that you check of like, I have the evidence that I tried to resolve this privately.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, here it is, attach the file. And then you just have a thing like, we'll get to you when we get to you. And in the meantime, here are your options: block, mute, et cetera, and so forth. Like all the ways you can be a grown up. Pull up your big girl or big boy panties because you're on social media now. I think if these companies just said, guys, this is not, you're not 5 and this isn't the playground. And we're not your mom, your dad, or your teacher. These are adults. You can't see them or hear them. They have that, just like, if you don't like it or you're getting offended so easily, like maybe the internet's not for you.
Right. No, but don't you think though that we have more, like, and this was in 2008, 9, in that range. Do you think we have a lot more spooked adults than we used to?
Yes.
I mean, you do have the media going out saying, the pandemic, all of this. You have people pushing the study, the pandemic study. This is 2.2 million people were going to die. The Oxford College of London, that event.
Yeah.
The media absolutely. I can see why certain people are absolutely spooked about COVID, and it's going to spook the people that were already kind of hypochondriacs, that were already a little on edge, but were fine when the temperature was low, and now the temperature's high, and you've created radicals. And that's what I think we have, is a lot more radicals. Now, how do you do your conduct moderation policy when you've got like a good chunk of people that are radicalized? Or almost
radicalized. It takes a
radicalized.
lot of courage, and it would take really like steel spine leadership. But I think it could be done the same way. I mean, it would be like the social media equivalent of Joe Clark. You know what I mean? Like, did you see that movie Stand By Me?
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the principal goes into the school that's like Lord of the Flies, and they basically say, we're going to close this school because you guys can't pass the end of your test at all. And it's like, it is a battle zone in there. Graffiti everywhere. There's no toilet paper in the bathroom. It's a nightmare. Teachers can't teach. Kids can't learn. This guy goes in there and he's just like laying down the law. This is how it's going to be. And this is what you're going to either behave according to these rules or you're out the door. And so, yeah, things got a little worse before they got better. And people are like, wee! And parents came to the school board meetings and screamed and yelled, he's got to go. He's so mean. But he stood firm, and the results were speaking for themselves. Like the whiny crybabies that were so spooked and easily offended and whatever, everybody just eventually settled down because the people who were appreciating the new situation and had the stability and like the fact that you weren't allowed to just bully your way into getting your way, they suddenly had the courage to stand up for themselves. They rallied behind him and his new rules, whereas before they wouldn't even stand up for themselves. It's like, we don't have leadership. We don't have leadership in any institution of our country right now. We don't have anybody stepping. I mean, like, you'll see it in DeSantis a little bit. You'll see the person who just stands up and goes like, this is what we're going to do. And I think it's why people like him. Yes. I think it's sort of why they liked, I mean, I would not call Donald Trump a leader, but what I'm saying is I think people are craving that notion of like someone who has a spine, who's not really as concerned that somebody's going to not like them or call them names or whatever. And that's why I think that Twitter is full of true believers, because they have to your point, they have so much power. They have so much soft power. They may not have as much financial power, but a tremendous amount of power. They could take this wherever they want it to go. They obviously want it to go where it's going.
Yeah, they feel like they're doing the right thing. Like, yeah, the progressive. And again, if you feel like you're fighting for civil rights, I mean, I imagine that the people feel like, yeah, this is 1963 in Alabama. That I've got to do the right thing, and this is, you know, the blowback that I'm getting is just from a bunch of racists.
Exactly.
Like, that's a reasonable. That's absolutely a reasonable thing, but also they're not thinking about the consequences. It feels like the whole values of, okay, yeah. The problem with free speech is you do get to hear a lot of, and you kind of forced to sometimes hear a lot of crap, you know, and but it's balanced by this. I mean, there's one way you could stop all rapes. Just make sure that men and women never interact with each other ever. Like, you know, keep people in solitary confinement, but you'd have to destroy society to do it. Like, this is, is the solution worse than the harm? I mean, that's the entire vaccine debate in a nutshell. And that's what this one is too. And I think the people on the other side know, like, they just don't believe in the values of free speech. They do not see it. So I think part of that is civics, that no one talks about this anymore.
Exactly. And I think the other reason people don't talk about things is they don't know how.
But the thing about your civics, right? The civics, when you thought that the United States was founded on really good ideals, right? Whether or not the country's lived up to it, you could say, but the ideals themselves are sacrosanct. But when you have a narrative, no, this is an oppressive nation, 1619, what did Neil deGrasse Tyson tweet out just about a week ago? Goes, white colonialism set up in 6 words. Oh, this yours? I'll take it. You know, that's been every culture. Throughout every, you know, the Native Americans.
He needs to, I was going to say, he needs to study some of the native tribes a little more closely.
The Mongols did it. Every tribe did this to every other tribe, and every small kingdom did this to other kingdoms. That's human nature, not white colonialism. So, but when you think that this is unique to America, then maybe these ideals weren't as good. Maybe they serve white supremacy or some kind of racism. Then that undermines it, completely undermines it. And that, I wouldn't mind that debate happening in school. God knows they're teaching the woke stuff. Like, somebody should come with the counterpoint. I just don't know if it's being taught.
It's not being taught in most of the schools because since the late 80s, they've been following the Howard Zinn model of U.S. history, which is everything is America's fault, America's awful, and so forth, and what you hear. They've redwashed it. So what I mean by that is they've taken out all the bad things about communism,
right?
Or they've minimized them to be kind of like, you know, they'll present it to you, but they'll put it on par with, for example,
it was just Stalin's fault.
Well, no, they don't even do that. They just will put it on par with slavery. They'll just say, see, you know, we did just as bad. Like capital, and then they say that's capitalism. So that's kind of how they say. And then all they have to do then is say, and that wasn't really real socialism. He was a totalitarian, so that didn't even count. And they don't teach about Mao. They don't teach about Pol Pot. They don't teach about North Korea. They don't teach about even like the Soviet East Bloc countries and how far communism reached. They don't teach about, you know, El Salvador, Nicaragua. I mean, they don't talk Cuba.
Yeah.
Most kids don't even know what that's all about. So they've redwashed the curriculum. They've poured a bunch of, you know, they've tarred and feathered our founders for not being perfect. And they leave out the part where it says, in order to form a more perfect union, like we didn't say it was perfect. We're just going to try to figure out this thing out and to be better than the countries we came from.
It's weird how, because like when they use more perfect, it's always like, is it perfect? There's no more. That's like infinity plus one. It's
exactly. But I think what they meant was not more perfect, like we are perfect. It's just like better. We are perfecting, or like we're working towards being better. They never said perfect, straight up perfect. And you know, I mean, even Martin Luther King talked about that like these ideals were worth pursuing, even though we haven't achieved them.
That's why people like the message. So, the people ask, why does the right like Martin Luther King so much? Because yes, this is in line with the message. This is living up to the ideals.
Exactly.
So teaching it. But what I'm saying, and like, if you listen to Dan Carlin at all, who's the hardcore history guy, He was talking. He's got a podcast called Supernova in the East, and that is like it's World War II, and it talks about Japan. But he talks about when you have like these people that have like stayed out in the Philippines till 1973 and they didn't surrender. And this wasn't uncommon. There were many that stayed years on different islands that didn't surrender. And also you have kamikazes flying themselves into planes, bonsai charges, just suicide. How this is absolutely unique to the Japanese. How did this society get that way? And one of the things he talks about is they radically changed the education system. And the people growing up in this were filled with this nationalistic type of, anti-colonialism. We need, as the Asian peoples, to unleash this. They called it the Greater East Asian Coast Prosperity Sphere. And they would rile these people up, and they have account after account of Japanese men, like of military, saying, "I want to do something about this. I want to help." And you create activists, and that all of this was a highly national military. But you can have the same thing. So wrecking education, this is how you can radicalize a population and doing wild things. So it gets scary.
It's very scary. And I mean, one of the things I've noticed lately is, you'll see people saying, well, I'm an anti-fascist, and yet they are calling for fascist policies. And whether it's canceling people they don't like who are mean, whether it's saying we want public-private partnerships and everything. So we want like the government to regulate every last little thing so it does it the right way, ESG, blah, blah, blah. But so people say, well, this can't be fascism because there's no nationalism. And nationalism in fascist Japan or fascist Germany was just a vehicle for executing fascism. It was just a way to package it so that you feel like you're part of it, this is like the tribalistic thing to get people rallied around the idea that you have the right to that you have the right to dictate to others, either in your own country or outside of your country, how they're going to deal with their property, with their lives, with their cultures, because your country's better. So like all it is your justification. It's not something separate and apart from or a prerequisite for fascism at all. Absolutely. I mean, we have, China's a fascist country and they're a little nationalistic, but they're certainly not like Nazi Germany nationalistic or even Tojo's Japan nationalistic. It's just a vehicle. They don't have to be present together. And yet what I find that we have now is in lieu of nationalism, we have tribalism, a new form, this woke stuff. And they're begging and pleading for government controls a la fascism and don't even know it. They don't even realize it. Like the people who got rid of you on Twitter would probably love nothing more while calling themselves anti-fascists to go through and get rid of all the myth-informed MKEs to prevent harm. Yeah. To protect American democracy. To protect freedom. That's what they'll say.
But that's the idea, and they'll be the new masters. And this is the same with the Japanese, that they called it was Pan-Asianism. And that we want, all these were colonial countries, many of which didn't like their colonial masters. India, the Dutch East Indies, all of those islands, much of Southeast Asia, the China in many cases. But they would say, we must throw these people out. We are going to throw out these white people and have this Pan-Asianism. But what do? They make the Filipinos bow to them. When the Japanese offered, but they were instituting the exact same racism that was happening on the other end. It was just a different person doing it. So that's the idea. You have your propaganda justifying it, but you end up doing the same thing that the other people did.
Identical. That's what I'm saying. Like they're saying we're anti-fascist, but get rid of him. Yeah. It's like myth-informed MKE has got to go because we're anti-fascist.
But if you think you're a Gnostic, that your code is the way, that this ancient Bushido code or whatever it is, and that we have found the correct way. And if critical theory, right? And that have how does Paulo Freire put it, the conscious Asau, right? If you have the critical consciousness, then you'll be okay because you have the Gnosticism in order to do it. Like, man.
Until you don't step one toe out of line.
The hubris, like that will run you ragged all day long, right? If you think that God is going to protect you somehow from the bullets, like you might want to think again, and this would happen many times in religion. People think that they're immune.
They do. And they were in like the Bolsheviks were the first ones up against the wall.
Mm.
I mean, I hate to say it. I don't mean to laugh. You know, the brown shirts, all of the people who were up front day one, you know, thought like we're leading the revolution. They were the first ones to go. The most loyal are always the first ones to go because they have expectations.
Yeah. And do you
They
see
have
that?
expectations.
Did you read Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago or part of it?
I have not. It's in my audiobooks, and
It's long. It's long.
It's,
but
it's on my list.
The descriptions of they had this mother, and she's being arrested. She's a fanatic, right? She's the hardcore. She's always been that. Then she gets arrested and thrown into the gulags, and she's writing to her like say 13 or 14-year-old daughter, and her daughter writes to her, and she's like, "Mommy, tell me, like, I need to know if what they say about you is true." And tell me it's not even but tell me the truth. And the mother, considering her reply back, she wants to say no, like it didn't. But if she does, now her own daughter might get pulled in. Well, maybe she's in on the plot. So what she actually does is write to her daughter, yes, I was anti-revolutionary. And this now her daughter can say, I hate my mother, excommunicate herself, and maybe save herself. This is the kind of weird stuff that's going on in the gulags. And imagine what's going through that woman's mind. Like, now I see what choice she's making, but like, wow. Well, I wonder what she was really feeling inside. I mean, story after story about crazy stuff like that.
Note to self, tell my kids, if I ever suddenly disappear or they arrest me and then go and, you know, like just, you know who I really am, but keep it under wraps. You know, it's like, I don't know. I mean, I don't mean to laugh. It's actually quite terrifying because I really think we're closer than we've ever been to something similar. Now we've gotten through some pretty bad stuff. We got through the Civil War. That was really bad. That was really, you want to talk about something that nearly destroyed the Republic. I mean, you know, hello. Then we had the 60s and part of the 70s, also pretty bad. Riots, assassinations, students being shot on, you know, at Kent State. I mean, bad things were happening. The government was like spying on its citizens and, you know, all over the place. That's why when people say, oh, this is such a crazy conspiracy theory, the feds are like embedding themselves in these protests, I'm like, do you know anything about history or do you just talk out your ass? You know, it's like, it's not a crazy thing because it's actually happened. Not just once, but like half a dozen times that we know of. And what about all the times we don't know of? Yeah. And these things happen in the 60s. And like somehow we survived as a union. Now some might say, well, we didn't really, because we just kept, you know, they kept marching through the institutions, these Marxists, and that's how we got here. So we survived sorta without lots of civil unrest, without a revolution and so forth. But did the Republic really survive? And that's a debate we could have. But I keep like hope springs eternal. I keep thinking that if we continue to just do our level best to tell the truth when we have the opportunity to, you know, as James Lindsay says, be based. Yeah. You know, like the lie is out there, but it's not going to go through me. Also Solzhenitsyn, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And then if we just stick to that and keep asking questions and don't just let people get away with their premises. See, the thing I always liked about your account and why I quoted it so many times on my channel, you guys, if you're watching, like you can go back to some of my old videos from like a year ago, and there's a lot of things I've pulled from their channel. I like the fact that you just question premises. You would just put something out there that was like, wasn't rude or anything. It was just a direct challenge to something everybody's walking around taking for granted.
Yeah.
And that needs to happen more because it's subtle. It's not so in your face, right? It's just like, well, but why do we do this? What about this? But what about this thing? And like, where do you get this information? We don't do that enough. And you're not saying you suck and you're stupid. You're just saying, I'm not going to accept this thing that you're telling me is a fact unless you explain how you arrived at this.
Yeah. And it's kind of what you want to do is, I mean, imagine if you're in the Middle East, right? And you're in the middle of some kind of huge religious conflict between whether it's Sunni and Shia Muslims or right. Jewish, Christian, Jewish people and Copts or whatever it is. like you have to normalize cross friendship, that a Jew can be friends with a Muslim and vice versa. And that, I think the Better Discourse event that we do is meant to normalize cross friendships. And then you can talk about all these things. You don't have to agree. You can think, wow, I think that person's a pretty cool guy. I don't agree with anything he says, but that's fine. That's the starting point. We are so far away from that. The idea is, no, you are not even supposed to come into contact with these people that maybe are in, I don't know, a Michigan militia or something. You're friends with like, well, then I better stay away from this. It's a religious concept called the occasions of sins. Have you heard that in Catholicism? The idea is like, it's not just enough to not commit adultery on your wife. You have to make sure that you don't put yourself in a position where you might, like maybe being alone with a woman or going to a strip club or
I think this is what like Mike Pence talked about.
Yes.
When Mike.
But what happens is you're going to roll total back conservative by doing these occasions, since they don't realize that they're practicing a very conservative principle by doing that can roll back. And this is how you get all kinds of fundamentalist religions, because they want to restrict you from doing anything going down the path.
Right.
The other things,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the other things, we have all these symbols now of who's who, pronouns in your bio, flags in your bio, this and that. Like, are you an ally? Signs in your yard that says, this home is free of hate, kindness is the way, or whatever. All of that. This is the new substitute for the religious. Remember, you're not allowed in the Bible. You can't wear like 2 sets of clothing with a different color. Like, I don't think that's ordained by God. This is how you found out, okay, that he's part of that tribe because they do that. We don't. They eat shellfish. We don't. Like, all of these ways were to say, okay, that's them. Like, these were hyper tribalized societies. We want to get away from that. Like,
well, that's going backwards.
Yeah,
it's going backwards. Yeah. Tribes were important when survival in the most basic sense, in terms of like we needed, our food and our shelter and all these different things and to be protected. When you don't have civilization, when you don't have a more, I don't know what, it's just a more civilized way of resolving conflicts, then tribes made more sense.
Sure.
But if you take,
it's in you though, right?
Oh, no, it's in the human animal. There's no question about it. I mean, we have not evolved fast enough to have it kind of in our DNA that we like, having a court system, for example.
I know. Yeah, that could be great if like chocolate didn't taste so good, right? And that when you're in abundance of food, the idea that chocolate tastes good is actually working against you. Exactly. Like, healthy food should taste good.
Exactly. But we you have, whether it's going from like Hammurabi's code, and then you're going upwards towards, the Magna Carta, and then you get up, it's like we've been steadily evolving towards more and more objective ways of resolving conflicts. It will never be completely objective, but just some way where it's like, all right, we're not going to go out and have a duel, and the tribe isn't going to have a little war. This is what we're going to do. We're going to court, or we're going to whatever. And I feel like with all this tribalism, we're going backwards.
Yeah. But and you have a base instinct inside of you. Like, have you ever been in an ICU, or like an NICU specifically, like a neuro ICU where there's head trauma? It's really interesting. So especially if you get like a frontal lobe hit. So this is, if you have the occipital lobe, that's vision, but this is your personality. These people often need to be tied to the bed, because men, especially when you reduce them to out their personality, it's food and sex, and they will try to grab the nurses' breasts, and they will say the most outrageous things, right? Women are different. They're also terrible when they're knocked out. But they get super catty, so they call the nurse a bitch or an old bitch, or it basically take every horrible male stereotype. Yep, that's what you are in the base, and your brain is keeping all of that at bay. And
that explains. I didn't know that, because, I mean, again, not to too personal, but my stepmother had lung cancer metastasized to the brain, and when it got to the brain, and she had to have tumors removed and different things. And I think she had something up in here.
Yeah.
And the thing that was so tragic is you were talking about, this woman was like the nicest, sweetest, kindest person you could ever meet. Like, absolutely adored her. And when that happened and she had to have the surgeries and the radiation up here, that's what she became.
Yeah.
That's her personality changed. And it was so heartbreaking, because, bad enough that your loved one is terminally ill, but then to have the last, months of their life or whatever, that's like, who are you?
Mhm.
you know, and you just have to remember that that's not really them, like that, you know, that's not who they are. But that does explain it. That I didn't know that's what
Mhm.
happens.
Yeah,
So
and the frontal
sad.
lobe tumors do that, and they'll take it's one of the signs too. If you're a person who's always like a stickler for time, right? And like gotta be on time, gotta be on time. They're always worried about being on time. Is now, "Oh, yeah, whatever, we get there, whatever." And now you're laissez-faire about that. That's not normal. That's indicative of a problem. And that's a lot of times you'll hear that when people come in with tumors, and like when you do the history, people say, "Have you noticed any of them acting different?" They're like, "Well, not really, but but it's these subtle things sometimes. Like the obvious raging bitch or raging asshole, that's obvious. But those other things, like your personality fundamentally changes. Like you're big into cooking and now all of a sudden you're not. That's probably that's indicative of something
Wow.
going on there.
So sad. I just think that what I worry about too is all the tribalism backing up on our kids, because kids are already more tribal than adults.
Yeah.
They're already looking to figure out, like, where do I fit and how do I belong? And then we're sort of cultivating that with them by telling them intersectional, find yourself in the box, and like pick your boxes and pick
And
your
try not
identities.
to let your monster out, right? That's just the weird thing with some of these protests, and they're so nasty, and people are screaming. Like your monster's in there. Don't let him out. Like these concentration camp guards and all these are ordinary people. These aren't like the why like you. We have to tell people to tame that down, and that's what's weird. Even the 14-year-old that you mentioned that said about the vax thing. I don't blame the 14-year-old for a whole lot of stuff, but still, there was a time that you said, okay, don't talk politics and religion. You told your kids this, not to go over there. I mean, imagine if you're going into the Muslim, and they ask you to take off your shoes. You don't say, well, we don't believe your religion. That would be awfully a rude thing for a 14-year-old to say.
Well, that's why I was taken aback, because we weren't talking about it in a political sense. We were talking about it in just in sense of like, well, you're probably okay because she had been there. And, it's like, well, you have recently had it and gotten over it. So you have, your natural immunity is probably going to protect you. And I was trying to reassure her that she was likely not going to get sick. We were
Yeah.
talking about it more in just conversation as like about health. And so it seemed really weird for somebody to pipe up and say, well, the natural immunity plus the vaccine would have been better, kind of thing. And I was like, I wasn't saying anything about the vaccine, other than, you've got natural immunity. I didn't say anything about it. So I was taken aback because, like you said, it wasn't that long ago that I would not expect a person who just met me of that age
Yeah.
to voice such a strong opinion, not knowing what my opinion was.
Sure. And I'm giving a
That's
14-year-old a lot of passes, but this is
Well,
happening
that's what
on
I
an
did. I was
adult
like,
level.
okay.
Yeah. But this could wreck friendship too. And now it's them there, right? That's those people in group, out group. On the vaccine, okay, we're not going to hang out with them.
Exactly.
Again, occasions of sin. They are probably more likely to get COVID. Even if, like, I think the actual number, what they say, the vaccine, quote unquote, works, it's 9% effective, which is, come on. Like, but even then, you could say, okay, well, we're 9% less. I don't even think it's 9, but who knows? But you see, like, the tribalism that can build up, and you feel like you're the good guys, because you're the one helping. Yeah, that's what Better Discourse is all about, and that we bring people from the progressive left, we bring people from like the MAGA right, the regular right, the liberal left, and you have the idea is you're going to talk honestly, and people do that. Some people, they'll get more heated than others, but the point is, you did show up, you argued as best good faith as you could, and everybody there that went to show up, and the crowd's diverse too. That's nice. If you can actually talk to random people in the crowd that will think differently than you and have a good conversation, where they don't immediately think you're on the other team. Oh, in fact, it's the other way. Like, oh, really? Why do you think that? You can actually, it's interesting. Or there's kernels of truth that you might want to take from the other side. But everything's been blown to smithereens, though.
I've learned so much from people who've come on this show who had experience I didn't have, about things that I'd already formed some opinions about. Like I thought, well, I've read about this, or I've, watched some videos, whatever. I thought I knew something about it. And then I'll talk to people who've actually experienced these things and, get their take. And I'm like, oh, wow, that was something I never thought of. And, so I learned from that. And then other people who come in already disagreeing about something, we might still end up disagreeing, but at least, I walk away feeling like I know more about my position. I know more about it, and I'll sometimes walk away saying, okay, I just learned something important, and that is that my argument for my position is not so great.
Yeah.
So even though I haven't really changed my mind, I was also not able to persuade the other person. Not like that's always my job, persuade them I'm right. But I'm saying I wasn't even good at explaining what my position actually is. So we were struggling. We didn't fight, but we were struggling to like understand each other. And I think the goal, if you're trying to be understood and you're trying to understand, that's a whole separate process of talking and engaging. And I think we've also been trained to fight, in other words, to argue or to like battle, and using really bad methodology, like, logical fallacy, bad, like just bad mouthing each other. And we don't really speak to be understood and to understand. And so what I'm hoping to do with this channel moving forward is to have more conversations, like you're doing Better Discourse. And how often do you do that? Once a year, twice a year?
Twice a year. Mm-hmm.
Twice a year. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to, like, in the micro sense, bring people on, like, one at a time, three at a time, but whatever, just have those kinds of conversations where it's like, we aren't starting out, not just me and the other person, but maybe other people too, not necessarily agreeing, but we have some kind of shared value or some kind of shared goal that we're working towards. And in my case, it would be improving education. So in my particular show, it's going to be being part of the solution, right? We're not going to fix anything. We're not going to make anything better if we keep talking past each other, or like, you're the bad guy, I'm the good guy, whatever. The only way we're going to make these things better is if we find out, like, what do you like or not like? What would you do? Your perfect world, describe it, that kind of thing.
And try to examine things too. Like if you're talking about, like, kids should be sent to over-sexualize things. Like, it's fair to ask them the question, something that might actually disrupt okay, we should keep drag kids separate from whatever. And then somebody says, well, what about you got front row tickets to the Cowboys Green Bay game and sat in the front row and you got a pretty skimpy cheerleaders out there? Is that over-sexualizing thing in the basketball? Like, twerking and stuff isn't, like, it's getting naughtier. Right. That's a reasonable question to be asked. And you should be able to explore that without saying, this completely undermines my point. And
exactly.
Also, yeah.
Actually, I'd rather have somebody say that to me, and then I'd have to sit and think about it and be like, that's a good point. I don't know if there's fundamentally a difference between the two, right? Like, what is the difference exactly? Yeah. Is it the ideology behind it?
Let's
is it
talk about
physically seeing it? Yeah, exactly. And they're also much more interesting conversations.
Yeah,
when push comes to shove, it's like,
and you've actually thought about it. So next time you have the conversation, when these things come up, you're like, that's what I thought about it. What do you think? And see if you can add. The other good thing, like, it's what a piece that I try to give to the radical feminists. They talk about toxic masculinity, and I think the conversation's gone all completely wrong. But I do think there is such a thing as toxic masculinity, and it's not what they say it is. What I think it is insecure men that are not leaders, your betas, if you will, trying to be alpha. That's absolutely toxic, right? The alphas don't have a problem. Like, an actual alpha, like, none of this stuff bothers them. They don't have a problem. So they've put their finger on a problem, but they have completely the wrong solution. And then they diagnose, oh, well, boys roughhouse, that's what it is. And what they miss about, like, kind of like male groups and how all male groups differ from all female groups, like, you would never, as a woman, grow into a group of women and point out to a chick and say, oh yeah, you're looking old, or you look fat. You're good. That's suicide. Dudes do this all the time. Man, they're like, dude, you gained weight, you're looking fat. Like, oh, you're pipes minimus, meaning you're not working out. And, like, it's awful, right? So you've got to, like, throw it back at him and this and that, right? It's a weird kind of bonding. The one thing
I wouldn't last for 5 seconds as a man.
Oh my God. The thing that the upside of it, there's some downsides, right? But the upside is there's actually an intimacy and that kind of humiliation back and forth.
There is.
And you know what to do. You could pick on them there, but you don't take the insult that's really going to kill them. You pick on those things that you can. That actually does create an intimacy where if you actually do get into a real fight with them, you don't have to be enemies forever, which often happens in all female groups. And I never heard this. I never hear that being talked about. You know, it's just, no, the boys, they need to act like, no, that boys should take the best strategies that women groups do and the positive, the good things that come out of it. And women should adopt some of the men's stuff, like as much as you can. It's just a different strategy.
I think you've just hit something though. And I think, you know, as much as people talk about toxic masculinity, I think, and I'm thinking about you getting booted off Twitter and about this mom and about many of the other, you know, women have complained about things. And, you know, I think it's toxic. It's a toxic kind of, because again, femininity isn't a problem. I mean, if you're a super feminine woman who wants to stay home and have babies or whatever, that's not the issue. The issue is the person who is not comfortable in that role and tries to be like a dude. And then whatever, and then is actually super thin skinned. They use that energy. They use that, like, I'm assertive energy to basically be a neurotic bitch to everybody. And that to me is Twitter. Like, so when I say Twitter, I mean Twitter management. Twitter management does not come across to me even half the time as those like insecure males or whatever. It comes across more to me as a bunch of catty bitches. Whether they're male or female is irrelevant, but it just comes across as that kind of like cattiness.
Yes.
Of what's allowed, what's not allowed, what's okay, what's not okay. It's this arcane set of rules. Nobody knows what they are. It's just like the popular clique at school, which was always worse for the girl clique than the boy clique, where it's just like, I don't know what the rules are. Today, I'm not allowed to sit here. Tomorrow, I'm not allowed to wear that. You know, it's like, I don't know what it is. I'm guessing as I go, and that's how they like it. They like you to be off balance, not really know, because that's the power. The power isn't, we can ban you. The power is, we can ban you and you have no idea when it's coming.
Yep.
You have no idea. You can't predict, you can't avoid it. But if I feel like exercising my power today, I will. And weirdly, that I think is this strange feminine thing that I'm calling it that. Maybe I'm wrong. You guys go ahead.
No, and I don't think
disagree.
All these things are good and bad. Like, is Tim Tebow a bad quarterback? Well, he certainly is for a passing offense, but if you're going to run the option with Florida, he's a fine quarterback, almost a dominant quarterback even. So have the strategies right. But yes, like if you're going to take the worst parts of like masculinity and femininity and expect that combo to work, that's not going to work. Yeah, aggressive plus thin-skinned will not work. You have to kind of adopt the whole strategy. If you're going to run a West Coast offense, then fine, have a passing quarterback. Don't run the eye. You know, that's no one talks about strategies. And so I try to tell them that, yes, I do believe that they're a point, because when you're talking to a partisan, they're going to just think you're crazy. And they'll sometimes say, you know, you've established just enough of trust to talk, but they'll be like, I don't understand. You seem like a good person. Why don't you get this? And that you actually want to try to talk, and then they'll hear you out. And if you can lay out the whole strategy, it's unlikely they're going to agree right away, but at least you've created another like bridge of understanding, then maybe. Because I really think men and women have a lot to learn from each other. I look at male and female strategies as opposed to, or feminine and masculine strategies as opposed to anything else.
Well, this is an interesting one. Masculine republics give way to feminine democracies, and feminine democracies give way to tyranny. Yikes. Yikes.
Is that Aristotle?
That's what he says. I'm probably misgendering. I've been doing this all week. There are people who have names that are like, and I'm just like he, and like generically saying he to all of them, like how, you know, Ayn Rand used to say he.
Yes.
Like, you know, where it was like whether it was just to refer to humans, like that's what I'm doing. And people are like, did you just misgender? You're like, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm guilty of that. Not gonna lie. Anyway, Aristotle has been Helsing to the SJW vampires.
Interesting.
I don't know.
What's that quadrant of like, you know, like the bad times create strong men create good times, weak men. And
that's okay. So Dion is female. I apologize, Dion. She. So we got it. Okay. So we need to see your give, send, go. Let me have that. I want to put that up as a banner so everybody can give to this, because we want to get Brian and Myth Informed MK back on Twitter.
I would really hope that. Yeah. I mean, 85,000, it took a while to build that up. And it's helpful to put some of this stuff out there. And again, we try to, that Twitter account, honestly, there's times that, yes, you could say it has a particular bias, but many times in the videos that we're trying to report as neutrally as possible.
Right, exactly. I'm gonna have to put this in the comments rather than a banner because it's too long a link. So here you go, guys. There it is. I'm going to pin this at the top so it doesn't disappear.
And
It'll
anyone
be at the
that's
top.
yeah, anyone that's like never been to one of these conferences really ought to try once. They are a blast.
Where's the next one gonna be? Where's the
we
next?
haven't. We're waiting. We're doing the Minds Festival of Ideas. So we're helping out a little bit with that. That one's going to be in New York on Saturday. That's awesome. It's got Tulsi Gabbard and Tim Pool and Ben Burgess and Destiny and James O'Keefe and Zuby and a whole ton of people. That one's really cool. So we're kind of like helping out with that, but that's so we haven't really started that planning. So we want it to be sometime in October, but not totally sure. We've been having them in Fort Worth the last 2 times because we have a friendly venue because you don't want to get canceled. I won't go into the stories of like how you can lose a venue. We've lost venues before. It's a nightmare.
For the Better Discourse event. And it's like, we're gathering people together of different opinions to share their views and have conversations. Oh no.
Right. And then they demand that you only, so they're fine with the left platforming the lefties, but then all the right people. So when they make the demands on the theaters, they need to cancel. We have to cancel all the people on the right. So I won't get into the whole stories, but they're crazy. But the events themselves are amazing because you can actually talk to people like that. People get along. They're a lot of fun. You get to hang out. The speakers are like in the audience. So there's lots of people having conversations with people that they watch on YouTube. That's really neat. We go all to the bar and stuff afterwards, and there's like people eating pizza with their favorite YouTubers and just having fun.
I would love to go to one. I think Fort Worth might be too far for me. Maybe if you have one in like Nashville or somewhere, because I'm in North Carolina, so I could get there.
Okay, yeah, we're yes. Any of
that. If you could do a Southeast one, and I can go.
I would say DM us because like that was the way we usually DM us on Twitter your suggestions, but put in the comments instead.
Yeah, or even like I could get myself to Florida easily enough. It's it's just getting over to Texas. I don't know. I should plot it out. How far is it to go to Fort Worth? Because I actually love
would be awesome. Tennessee,
yeah, I think it would be fun. But I mean, Fort Worth is a great location anyway because there's so much culture there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to do when you're not doing the event or whatever. Mm-hmm. So plus we can visit with Carrie.
Yeah, Carrie's a lot of fun. She really is, and she's done a ton of moderating for us. She's a really good moderator, and but that's what you want to do. We have that question: can a man be a woman? Blair White's on that. Josh Slocum, Colin Wright, and Justin Gibson, who's
great.
They're the hardcore progressive, but the thing is, Justin shows up every time. He doesn't ditch, and he studies hard for these. Like he puts a lot of effort in. He's not just coming up on stage to throw insults. He actually really works hard. So I got to respect that. I mean, whether you agree or not, but you have to be able to establish friends on the other side. If you can't make one friend that's like a partisan on the other side, you might want to look in the mirror and say, what am I doing wrong? Like, because it is possible to do.
Yeah. I've found in the past, it's more a situation of they don't want to be friends with me.
Right. Like, well, then find the ones that do. Like,
well, right. I mean, that's always the challenge is kind of like, because I grew up in New York and I went to school in the Northeast, I obviously had a lot of friends who were on the left. And then coming into COVID, I still had about 3 of them that were sort of long-standing friendships. The kind of friendships like we've been friends for 20 years, that kind of thing. Every single one gone, ditched me. Ditched me. And it was like, they didn't just say, wow, we just really don't share common ground or values. It was like a big to-do. It was a big, you are a horrible person because you disagree with me after this. And it hit like a brick because I was not going into their world and saying, you need to live the way I live and you need to think the way I think or anything. I knew they thought differently than I did. And I just left it alone. It's kind of like, okay, that's fine. So in other words, I wasn't contradicting. It's not like they were posting things on social media like, you're wrong. And it was just, I was saying things in my world. So I'd say something on my Instagram, or I'd say not even that aggressive stuff, just like, I think X, not everyone who thinks this is an idiot. And one of my friends in New York sent me, like, she screenshot it and she sent it to me and she said, I don't know you anymore. I don't know who you are. What a horrible person you are. And I'm like, so it was a real horrible experience, because I really did always try to be that person who was kind of like friendship, politics, like, we don't have to agree on everything. So that it's been more the other direction. Not like I'm so pure and perfect. I just never occurred to me. I would have had zero friends
Yeah.
growing
And
up
yeah.
if I wouldn't be friends with someone who was left leaning.
Yeah, part of social justice ideology has that, again, occasion of sins. You should avoid the people on the other side because, like, you don't want to, quote, normalize them. So if you're part of this ideology, you might actually get yourself in trouble, not only with your friends, but in following the ideology itself. It's like, I say I'm a Catholic, but I never go to church, right? That's actually a reasonable self-assessment. Like, am I really a Catholic if I don't go to church or whatever? But they say, supporting this, the little things that you could do might be able to, well, maybe if I back off, maybe Deb will come around. Maybe she'll see, maybe that's activism. So I sort of see where they're coming from. It sucks that ideology got overvalued on the friendship.
Right.
That's what I don't like. It didn't used
Yeah.
to be that way.
I would rather someone approach me and say, we've been friends a long time and you have this opinion now that I just so strongly disagree with, and I really don't understand where you're coming from. And it's hard for me. Like, it's really, really hard for me to process what you're saying because it makes me feel like I don't know who you are. Like, that is a reasonable thing to say.
Sure.
It's honest. It's not like mean. It's just saying, I respect our friendship enough to be honest with you that I'm at a crossroads here. I don't know what to say. But I found that is not even allowed. Like you said, it's almost like they treat you like you're kryptonite.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the religious component comes in, where it feels like a religious kind of I don't know what you want to call it, loyalty or adherence, fundamentalism. They act afraid.
Yeah. But if you went into a fundamentalist religion that saves your life, like take Scientology, JW, parts of Islam, parts of like some hardcore Christianities, and that, like, say it got you out of rock bottom and you were doing drugs or whatever, and then now you're kind of slow, you could kind of sort of think, maybe I'll fall back into it because now you've got this new value in your life that you didn't used to have. And then, but if I stray out of it, maybe I'll go back into it.
Yeah,
that's I think that's a problem. It's the rise of this new value that then even eclipses your friendship. And I can see why that hurts. And that's happened to me too. And it sucks. So it's cool then to find other people that do it. If the more and more you can find that the cases where they will talk to you, then maybe some of those people will see, well, they're doing it. And maybe they'll change their minds and get less fundamentalist.
Right. Can you explain what you mean by fundamentalists to people? Because some people hear that as like, well, I'm just convicted. Like, I have convictions about, my beliefs or whatever. And other people hear that as like, jihadi. So, I mean,
right.
What exactly, how are you using
so it doesn't mean, I don't mean it as like a terrorist. What I mean by fundamentalist, that you're so strict to your principles that you can't go outside of them. And you're afraid that you, by any kind of liberalization of your way and worldview, might screw that up. So
sounds like you actually aren't very convicted. Like, to me, confidence in your convictions gives you more courage to go out and talk to people who don't share them, because you're not worried at all that they're going to take you outside of that.
It's a good point. I mean, in some ways, a recovering alcoholic that is now dry and is going to always be dry and make sure that they never take a drink is a form of fundamentalism. But there's also ones that can go into bars and still not drink and be with others. And then there's others that don't want to be around that at all. But the more fundamentalist, I would say that maybe fundamentalism is you believe so strongly that your in-group keeps shrinking, and the only people you want to hang around with are your in-group, and that you are almost the out-group. I guess that you look at them as the other, the outsider, the enemy, and and you stop dealing with them. Like, it's the lack of pluralism. So to me, fundamentalist is, I guess you could be fundamentalist and pluralist. To me, it's just that you're going, you're intolerant. So I guess you're right. You could be fundamentalist and very pluralistic, but I doubt it. I mean, what society where you have a huge amount of fundamentalist religion and a large majority is tolerant? That's not. Like fundamentalism can exist within a tolerant society. But I mean, 80% of people following a fundamentalist religion, that's going to turn into almost a theocracy.
Right.
So that's
Well,
what I mean.
I
It's
think
the
then it
intolerance.
sounds like, yeah, because it sounds like then in order to be sort of described as fundamentalist, you need to actually lack a little faith. In other words, to real faith is you're not afraid to you're not going to sin, you're not going to change your mind, you're not, you believe so deeply in something that other people, and it doesn't mean that you agree with those people, it doesn't mean that you would want to maybe have your kids play with their kids either, right? Like you just have a conversation, but you'd be like, all right, I can work with you and I can have a conversation with you, but no, I probably don't want my kids to play with your kids because your worldview is so fundamentally different than mine, but I don't wish you harm and I'm not going to like attack you and I'm not going to try to get you to change your ways. See, I guess for me, that's sort of the cutoff. The cutoff for me between, in my definition of fundamentalist and not, would be that person who says, I cannot peacefully coexist with you anywhere in my vicinity because you are a threat to me. Your belief system is a threat. There's that. Having said that, I've had to challenge myself on numerous occasions because when I think about people who are woke and I think of what they want to do to our kids, what they want to do to the United States of America, our Constitution, etc., I have to sit there and say, wow, I'm really up against it here because I don't want to be the kind of person that says, you know what, you need to be far away from me and, just not vote. Like there's this part of my brain that's saying in my little dark heart, I don't want these people voting my rights away. I don't, but at this, it's like a push-pull thing with me in terms of my morals and my values that I know they're dangerous and they mean me harm and they mean my children harm and they mean this republic harm. But I've always been a person who says, no, you don't tell people what to believe and you don't tell people how to vote. So it's hard.
It is.
That peaceful coexistence with people who I absolutely know mean me harm. It's really challenging.
Right. Now, if they share the toleration and the pluralism, then you can say, well, then that person doesn't mean you harm because they want to keep that local and so on and so forth. But there is a big difference between saying we're going to make it illegal. Like to pass a law that you as a mom can't take a kid to a drag show. That's one thing. And then saying, look, I don't want drag queen story hour in my kindergarten class. Total different things because this is a public thing. Whatever goes on in that school is of your import. Mm-hmm. Whereas legislating that they can't do something, that would be bad. I haven't seen you advocate for that.
No, would I? I mean, no. I mean, to me, it's kind of, I think it's fair game. If you're using my tax dollars, I have a say in saying, no, you can't do that. But I think when it comes to public places, there's that middle ground where we don't need legislation, but I would like to see the culture return to one that, is really emphasizing public decency and emphasizing the kind, right now we're shamed if we don't take our kids to these kinds of shows. In other words, if you find that to be really cringeworthy and you don't want your kids even hanging out with the kids who go to drag shows, okay? Yeah. We get shamed. We're the ones who are shamed. They were called overbearing. We're called sissies. We're called terrible things, right? Hover parents for just wanting to not let our kids watch R-rated movies until they're ready or whatever. And that's the problem. I want to flip that around from a social standpoint, not, the social pressure, not legal. Yeah. Fine. It's legal to take your kids. But I just don't think it's a good idea. And I wish I wasn't the one getting, harassed for saying that. To me, that seems backwards. Yeah. But it's not just because I want to be right and I want them to be wrong. I think there's evidence behind what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Yeah, there absolutely is. And things can get justified. Atrocities always get justified in the greater good, right? Nobody, like the idea of the James Bond person that says they're evil, like that's a fantasy. Even ISIS, if you read the Dabiq magazine, and they wrote this, they said this many times, but they had a big article in one of them that said, why we hate you and why we fight you. And it's written in perfect English, amazing copy editing. I mean, these people know how to write. They're smart. And they're doing this in a war zone. Right. So it's amazing that they can crank out this propaganda. And one of the things they said is, look, we're doing this they're very explicit that it's not oppression. It's not about jobs or economics or politics at all. They're like, look, you don't worship the oneness of Allah. We do. And what their argument is that they're worried about souls, not just the 7 billion souls that are currently on the planet, but think about future generations. What about in 2672? How many billions of people will have lived since then? So if we kill a couple billion people now, and it works and converts everybody to Islam, those other souls that would have been Christian or Jewish or whatever, or atheist going forward, they're all going to hell. We're actually saving people from hell. That's a good. That's the justification and good. And that you could take that to anything. Again, like right wingers, we're just stopping this. Think about how many bigots will be created if Deb Philman still have her YouTube channel. That's the reason why they want to take you down. It may not even be about you. It might be about somebody else. They're like, we're shutting down your YouTube channel. Nothing personal. And the ISIS guy might say that to the Shia or to the Christian or to the person that he's killing.
Exactly.
Nothing personal. I just care about souls in the future.
Yeah, I guess what's hard for me is I don't buy it. Like I know we're told like they really believe it and they're writing and they're saying that we really believe it. And I really think that most of these kinds of anti other humans, like to the point of death, okay, are gross rationalizations to justify hurting people. I mean,
right. But why make them? Why make them in the first place, though? Somebody must need them. So at least one person needs them because you made the rationalization.
Right. But what I'm saying is I think that the rationalization is created because whoever decided, like Muhammad, people talk all the time about, well, Muhammad was not a very nice person. Okay. Yeah. And so, maybe the people below him that were following all these proclamations and this is what you must do really believed it. I'm skeptical whether he did.
Yeah. I just point.
So, and I feel the same way about some of these tyrants who come to power. I've read Mein Kampf. Mm-hmm. And so I know what Hitler thought and so forth. And I know that he had a deep contempt and disdain for pretty much everyone else, everyone, including people who followed him and liked him. Mm-hmm. And I find that, it takes that level of contempt for other human beings to want that kind of power in the first place over their lives. And then to use the kind of manipulation techniques that you need to use to get people to believe horrible absurdities. And what has always been confusing to me is why all the people below, which would also account for, like all the people who just fall in line with the woke stuff. I'll never understand that.
Well, maybe that's what the justification is for. Because remember, like it's the concentration camp guard is the ordinary person. Hitler.
That's what I'm saying.
But that person needs the justification, though. And if you put him outside, like Josh Slocum said that we have been reduced to like a contagion or something of that sort, like some kind of like insect or contagion, and we are now outside the circle of moral concern. Right? Jews in those concentration camps were outside the circle of moral concern because they very much cared about Germans that were being, fire department was coming for bombings, raiding in cities, but no one, but if you say, well, they were a contagion, we're doing this, we're keeping them in the camps because we're preserving the larger society. That's the justification. And that might work for some of these people.
I think there's a lot of, I interviewed a guy who wrote a book called, Hollowed Out, about the current generation of young people, young adults and children, and that what's missing is purpose. What's missing is any kind of even pursuit of purpose that they know how to do. Like even to say, this is a kind of purpose in life, or this is what life is about, or this is like a worldview that is constructive, positive, that you can find purpose, and finding purpose is worthwhile. So that makes you pretty much, hollow and ripe for someone to come along and go, here you go. Here's your purpose.
Yep.
All I can hear now is Steve Martin going special purpose. And that's not what I meant.
But no, it's such a big thing. If you're going to pull out woke, something else is going to replace it too. So if somebody's identity obsessed, I don't know whether it's gay or trans or what, like say, like, I just don't think that's the most important thing about you. If I want to get a kid that's obsessed with identity off of that, I'd say, look, I think the most interesting things about your sense of humor, like your style, this and that, all of the other things, help them put their identity more into that. Because if you pull out non-binary, you're gonna leave something. You need another tentpole and find a genuine one that you really feel like they can get on. That
Right.
People need it. Religion's failing. I think more people are finding purpose in politics. I told this story to Amy last night about this guy from the British Communist Party who said that after he left, he was telling kind of like who are the most effective people and how were getting their people. And he says the best people in the Communist Party all went to religion first. And they showed up at the church and they said, look, I'm all in. You know, I'm at that point in my life. What do? I'm all in. Tell me what to do. And they're like, well, maybe come to service 30 minutes before and set up the chairs. They're not, the religion isn't asking much of people. Now, Islam is. They still are, but much of Western religion is not. And you don't find that purpose, but then the communists will give you purpose and they'll say, look, we got so much stuff for you to do. And you're going to find that you'll be able to handle more than you think you can. And man, that binds a group together. Now you've got your comrades and you're all working for a goal.
Well, that's actually one of my problems with the whole drag queen thing or drag queen story hour is that we've lost the simple pleasures and gratitude for small things. The simple beauty and simplicity of those small benefits and blessings in life, whatever they might be, like your health or like having, a family that loves you or whatever, just simple things to be grateful for. And when they come in and they explicitly say in their pedagogy, they want to show kids that regular life is boring. To say it, that, regular, just regular reading of the story with what they call a regular teacher, and they put it in quotes, a regular teacher is banal. But when you have a drag queen do it, then they see, that it's like Technicolor turned on and it's so much more exciting and all this stuff. And that they need to free up their imagination to imagine the what they call the ideality. In other words, not reality, ideality. That's the goal. And if we don't free up children, don't liberate children to pursue the ideal, which looks like this, they're calling themselves, which looks like breaking all the rules, dressing up as what, in other words, they call it self invention or something, like you just invent whatever you want to be, then somehow we're oppressing them or it's bad or whatever. That's what they want to do. They want to teach them that reality is boring. And we already have a population of people who just all they have to do is look up from here and go, oh, never mind.
Yeah. And what do they call it? Queering, right? Like queering the society.
They say school, they actually admit that they're using the structure of school that they say correctly. The purpose of it was explicitly to sort of get the kids to straighten up and fly right, like bring in all these people and have them go one way, which is part of my problem with government schooling, right? That everybody has to like do the same thing and think the way, but they admit they're using it in all the structures that are in there to queer them. Yeah, they're just inverting the straightening to queering, and they admit it.
And you're right. And then you have to
do the same thing.
Once that becomes normal, you're going to have to queer it further, right? The revolution must always continue. James Lindsay
never stops. There is no end.
Amazing thing on queer theory. Yeah, it was 2006 or 2008. Did you see the ones you got it all highlighted? They're talking about drag queens in schools back then. In fact, there's no way that would have flown in 6 or 8.
That's the paper I went over yesterday, and I was just reading this, and I just went like, and they're admitting that we can use the language of school about achievement and all this stuff when we have to. And I'm like, they're admitting they're lying. Mm-hmm. And I was like, and this, like you said, this is, a few years ago, and parents are sitting there thinking, oh, we're so evolved. We're so evolved. We're having this in our library. And I'm just sitting there thinking you're dupes. And I don't say that to be mean. Like they're playing you. And this isn't what you said.
It's easy to get played.
It is.
I used to think that the CIA and all the intelligence, things just missed the WMDs.
Yeah.
It didn't occur to me that they were lying. That's a fairly new revelation. Yeah, I was duped.
And I mean, yeah, for a while there too, I was like, well, Colin Powell wouldn't lie.
I
I felt the
know.
same way. I was like, Colin Powell wouldn't lie. And then, there were all these things that I just, like you, I was like, well, they just spirited it out to Syria. They just took it somewhere else. They did it. Well, what if this, what if that? It took a while for me to admit that, nope, no, they were full of crap.
Yeah.
They were
So
full of crap.
maybe some of the people that are supporting it are on that same, they're in the middle of the duping. And that's
Exactly.
even that seed of doubt. I think that's the only way to do it. You brought up an interesting thing though. You said grateful. That people, it's hard to admit that you're grateful. That's an interesting thing. Do you think, because the immediate thing popped into my mind, do you think the whole narrative on privilege that would discourage kids to say, I'm grateful for, lest they sound privileged?
100%. Because first of all, they don't want to acknowledge they have things that other people don't want to have. It's now been like, it used to be, you don't want mom or dad. I'm sorry, my daughter just sent me something funny. It used to be, you don't want mom or dad dropping you off in the beater car. Like if you didn't have a nice car,
Sure.
or or that dropped me off a block away from school, right? Or you didn't want your friends to come over to your house. It was, remember in Pretty in Pink? I don't know if you saw the movie, but she gets a ride home from one of the girls who's the rich girl. And, and she's like, oh, it wasn't Pretty in Pink. Actually, it was, the one with, the girl who was in Back to the Future.
Oh.
No, it's Some Kind of Wonderful. Okay. Some Kind of Wonderful. Okay. Amanda Jones is the character, and she dresses very nice, and she looks the part of the popular girl, and she is the popular girl because she's beautiful, but she comes from the other side of the tracks. Mm-hmm. And all the popular girls are super rich. Like, well, when I was in Gstaad skiing, this kind of crap. So they offer her a ride home one day. And she says, oh, can you just drop me off like over there? And it's fine. It's close enough. I'll walk the rest. No, we'll drive you all the way home. No, I'm good. She didn't want to be dropped off because she lived in this really crappy little house and they live in mansions, whatever. Today, it's the opposite. Today's kid will be like, yes, please take me to my house and see that I love, it's like they'd be so excited to be not well off. But if they have things, they are constantly inventing things to be wrong with them. This happened at my daughter's charter school where I would say, probably at least half the kids, it was right in town. It was like an urban center charter school, but it attracted, the kind of urban elite kind of people. And I noticed after we went there. And these kids, parents drive up in Range Rovers and whatever, drop them off, even at public school. They would wear the rattiest clothes. I mean, ratty, like they got them at Goodwill, literally. Like they would go shopping at Goodwill and get used clothes to wear. And the more ratty, the better. They looked disheveled and dirty. They couldn't have enough things wrong with them. Like my daughter would come up and say, well, this one has this disorder, that disorder, and the other disease, and that thing, and that thing, and the other thing, and this, mental health problem, whatever. And I'm just like, how do you know all this? It's like 2 weeks into school. How do you know this? Wow. Oh, well, because they told me and they asked me what mine were. It's like what are your preferred pronouns is given away to what are your preferred, acronyms for your mental illnesses. Well, I'm bipolar and I have generalized anxiety disorder and I'm ADHD and I also have this and that. And
what I think are you? Pansexual.
Right. And then of course that was if you couldn't have a disorder. See, if you were cis and straight, you had to have all kinds of mental problems. If you didn't have that, then you had to be not straight. And of course, bi was the thing of choice. Yeah. Bi was the one.
Or non-binary. Yeah. How do you?
Or just non-binary. If you looked a little bit boyish and you're a girl, you're non-binary. It wasn't too many boys saying that, but there were a lot of girls saying that.
Yeah.
And then, or it was, I'm anorexic. They would become anorexic or have eating disorders. And so that would be your problem. So gratitude, if you were to say, nope, I'm really lucky. Or I'm grateful. I have a lovely home life and my parents are married. You can't say that.
Yeah.
You've got to be the anti-grateful person because, and that's doesn't matter whether you're white or black or anything else, but it's certainly more acute if you're white.
Right. And isn't that straight up opposite in religion, right? Religion is always trying to tell you to thank God for the things that you do have. Whether like if you're poor and this and that, but you're healthy or whatever it is, that you're smart and not dumb, or you're dexterous and not clumsy, whatever it is, like, of course you've got your crosses to bear and all of this, but Yeah, that's interesting. And
Yeah.
that
And the
that
kids
sucks
are,
to not be able to say you're grateful for something because yeah, wow.
and they'll do these sometimes they'll do gratitude exercises. Like, what are you grateful for? And invariably it comes out like something like, I'm grateful for the opportunity to give back to my community, or I'm grateful for the opportunity to recycle, or I'm grateful that we're fighting climate change. Like it's not, they're explicitly taught not to be grateful
Yeah.
for the blessings of their own life or even for their own life. Their own life is they're taught very young that their life is to be of service to others
And in a specific way.
in a
Did you
very
see it?
specific way.
There was a couple of years ago, this graduate student was trying to apply to this program to get a grant for either his PhD or something. And he wrote in and he was really concerned about malaria. And since malaria is the #1 killer, he wanted to go after that. And they said, well, why do you want to go after malaria? And he goes, well, just the numbers. He goes, if we could fix 60% of those, like it would be the best thing on life that you could ever get. He goes, this is just straight up math. And they're like, so you're picking it for practical reasons? You don't want to pick it because this is affecting like the downtrodden, that these people are already marginalized, that people with malaria are fit into. That's the way they want to, like, why not just take the prize? Why isn't his thought process good enough? That it's odd to me. So you're right. I can see that fitting in.
It's everything's inverted. Everything is inverted. And so I don't know. I mean, I guess, like I said, I just hope that we can have more of these conversations. And I hope that, like better discourses all year kind of deal is sort of, or better discourse all year, what in a very tiny, like what I want to be is the education version of that. Tiny microcosm of that, because I don't want to branch out. I mean, I'm focused. I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. That doesn't mean I don't want to talk about, politics or philosophy or things like that. I do. I just think for this particular show, I want to stick to what I want to stick to this area.
That's what you want. Yeah, that's
yeah,
smart.
that's what I want to do.
Expertise.
But here's the great thing about that though, is I think even, somebody like yourself, where you've gone out and you've covered these things and covered what's going on in school to give parents, I still think it allows me to speak to everybody, like anybody and everybody, not just teachers, not just parents, not just, because we all have a stake in this, right? I mean, culture is downstream from education, and then politics is downstream from that.
Yeah.
Sure. And so if we don't all participate in making it better, or to at least talking about how to make it better, forget about it. We don't have a chance.
It would be interesting to have like a teacher panel. Like we've talked about critical race theory and these kind of debates, but the debates on critical race theory itself, it's actually not a debate on critical race theory is not going to happen in schools. Like, how is this, what practically coming out in the schools and, more of a real world consequence? Because you could talk about like cell biology, but you talk to doctors about cell biology and they look at you weird. They're like, dude, that's not medicine. Medicine is the patient that's right in front of you. That the physiologist, they don't want to hear about Golgi complexes.
Well, I'm one step ahead of you. I spoke to a teacher who is resigning next week, and I'm hoping to get her to come on the show and talk, because she's got a lot of things that going forward that I think will make her a good person to talk to. She's in California. She is neither right nor left. She's, just like the kind of person who she taught economics, high school economics, loved teaching, just not coming on to be like, super anti-woke in the sense of like she's a conservative and wants to talk about it. She's just genuinely concerned about all aspects of it, and including the part about how the system itself. So yeah, the woke thing's a big problem. Academics, big problem. But like she wants to talk about the whole topic, and you rarely find that. And she was just, I had a conversation where I thought, I really want to get you in front of people, because this is a golden opportunity for people to hear from a teacher with a lot of experience who is leaving for reasons that are dissimilar. That's part of it, but that's not like the only reason. Right. And then I found someone on YouTube, similar situation, where he made a video about like, this is why I'm leaving after 18 years or whatever it is. And his reasons are different than what you might imagine as well. Yeah. And I thought this would be really interesting, because I've been focusing so much on the wokeness and the, like, oh, what do the teachers have to deal with who are not woke? But like you said about the doctor, there are teachers and they're going, girl, the wokeness is like 10th on my list of stuff. Or you know what? Woke didn't even get in front of my face. I was in an urban district. It's 100%, minority.
Yeah.
Like that was not our issue. Our issue was this other thing. And, people aren't even talking about our issues. They're busy talking about this issue. And I want to improve education. It's not just about de-wokeifying it or making it. Yes, that's a big problem. And that is contributing to the ruination of it for all kids and for us, right? But it's so much bigger than that. And so talking to a wide variety of people with different kinds of stories is essential, or we're going to miss, it's like, why did people go down this path of like, oh my God, some people are being kidnapped. We need to do this. Like you said, with this overly simplistic solutions. Kids are getting bullied because they're gay. We got to do this. Rainbows everywhere. Nobody thinks about the unintended consequences of what they're doing in general, or even for the specific people they're trying to help.
That's
you hear
really good point. Yeah.
You hear now people from the LGBT, I say LGBT, I don't even add the T in the Q community. They're like, please, not me. No, please don't stop talking for me. Like, you're not helping. Stop helping me. That's
one of the unintended consequences too is that there's going to be backlash against the LGBT or the LGB, even though it's the Q and the T ideologies that are really in question. And
exactly.
Those are unintended consequences too.
And you don't ever hear, and then people say, well, why aren't they speaking up? And I'm like, did it occur
they tried. They've been kicked out.
I know. I was like,
black eyes.
A, they're kicked out. B, they're bullied more than I would be. Okay. So that's, you're always kicked out of your supposed group harder. Secondly, no one's platforming them.
Yep.
It doesn't get the clicks. It doesn't get the shares. People aren't interested in hearing from somebody who's saying,
they want to keep their jobs.
Right. So my goal is to say, I want to platform these people. I want to platform people nobody's hearing from, because I have a sneaking suspicion there's a lot more rational, input to really solving some of these problems. Talk to some teachers, talk to parents, talk to people who are happy with their school. What is good about it? Tell us what's working. And why is it working? There's just so many more people to talk to. So I hope, you guys are kind of a bit of a role model in that respect. So for what that's worth. And
that's
I hope
really good.
You guys give, send, go. Please give what you can to this effort to fight this, because we do need Myth Informed MK back on Twitter in some capacity. Where can people find you now, since you're not there?
Yeah, so we're not there. So we're at Myth Informed MKE on all the different socials. So that's a Minds, Truth Social, Getter, Facebook, Instagram, and on YouTube. So we have a YouTube channel there. We should probably start using that a little bit more. It's just when you had a bigger Twitter account, it was just easier to kind of like, you were going to reach more people there. So we were.
Don't I know it?
Yeah, hopefully it could come back. But yeah, so that's where we are. If anyone's in and around New York, that event will be really cool. And it's just like right now, if you go to that Better Discourse event, it's going to show the last event. But as soon as we launch, then it will show the newer event. So it's probably sometime in October. Those are a lot of fun. They're energizing. You get to talk to a ton of people. It's really fun to see who shows up.
Yeah. Well, I hope to get to one someday. And I'm really glad that you came on today to tell us your story, tell what's going on. I think it evolved into a really interesting conversation in general. And I hope people take away from this that in your own lives, just pursue better discourse. If you can. No one's saying kiss butt here. No one is saying that.
Every time you meet a person that's on your out group that's actually normal, like that, it is such a feel good.
Yeah,
it really is. Because if you meet them, that means they're less rare. Like in medicine, when you see something, like it's the fact that you saw it, your first indication is it's not rare. Like the rare stuff you just never see.
Exactly. So let's keep that going, guys. And please, if you're not subscribed yet and you're watching this on the replay, please subscribe. Please go follow. Go to betterdiscourseevent.com. Also find Myth Informed MKE on all the other platforms where they are right now. Give to the Give, Send, Go. And stay tuned to this channel. Some good things, big things are coming next week, starting Monday. And then Tuesday, I've got something really big. So make sure you... I'm very excited. Speaking of Better Discourse, it's going to be a great conversation I'm going to have, but I can't tell anybody who it is yet. It's going to be a surprise.
That's a pretty good cliffhanger. So,
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm super excited. But you have a great rest of your week, and we look forward to having you back soon on Twitter.
Awesome. Thanks, Deb.
All
I
right.
really had a
Take
good
care.
time. All right.
Thanks. Bye.